All right. Good morning, everyone. This is a brief recording for chapter three because we cannot virtually meet this morning. So let me do a brief summary of what we discussed last class. Then after that, we'll cover the key things, just the key things in the rest of chapter three. It's not going to be a long lecture because it's just me speaking. So if it was face to face, again, there would be questions, discussion. It would be longer. Last time we said there's a difference between ethics and morality. Morality is referring to value judgment, the fact that we judge certain actions to be right or wrong, certain people to be good people or bad people. And in ethics, you study these things. You study. What do we mean by right? What do we mean by wrong? Do we have obligations? Is morality real? What is the good life? How can I be happy? What is the highest good? Questions like this. We said also ethics can be further subdivided into normative ethics, meta ethics, and applied ethics. Normative ethics, we said, is the study of the principles, the rules, theories that we should use to guide our actions. So whenever you use words like you ought, you must, you should not, you're engaging in normative ethics. And I said the Ten Commandments in the Bible are a good example. Like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. We said meta ethics. Meta is concerned with the structure, with the foundation, with the basis of ethics itself, what ethics itself is, the meaning of ethical terms like right and wrong and good and bad. So in ethics, you don't tell people what they ought to do, what they should do, but again, you try to decipher the bare bone, the structure of what ethics itself is. And we said apply ethics. You take a theory, you take a rule, a principle, you apply it to a specific case or issue in the real world. We also discuss moral objectivism. The question is morality real? Is morality real? We said moral objectivism says morality is real the same way scientific facts are real. If I were to say the earth is round, the earth is flat, or the earth goes around the sun, or water is H2O. If water is H2O, this is universally true. This is transculturally true, transculturally. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not, water is H2O. If there were no people on the planet to discover that, the truth that water is H2O would still be true. So likewise, if I were to say slavery is evil or rape is evil, it is as objective as scientific claims. We also discuss moral absolutism. The claim is that moral principles allow for no exception. If something is wrong, it is wrong universally, transculturally. It is wrong for everyone at all times and in all places. For example, if lying is wrong, then lying is wrong in all cases. Even if you even if you think you're doing it for a noble reason, you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, you want to save somebody's life, lying is wrong, no exception. And we begin to discuss moral relativism, which is the opposite of moral objectivism. Relativism says morality is relative, either to the person, the individual, or to a group of people or a culture. And we spent some time discussing subjective realism, which is the view that as long as someone approves of a behavior, as long as it feels right for you, then it is right for you. So this idea says morality is like taste. I may love Chinese food, you love Haitian food. I may think blue is the most beautiful color, you think red is the most beautiful color. So those things we say they're subjective because it's a matter of opinions. There's no way of proving them to be the case. So this idea says morality is exactly the same. Something that is right for me may be wrong for you, and vice versa. So the rest of chapter three gives us some theories. The same way in science, you have theories, moral theories explained in sorry, Scientific theories, they explain the natural world. If you want to know why the earth goes around the sun, there's a theory called gravity. If you want to know why children look like their parents, genetics would explain that. So in ethics, there are theories, but they do not explain the physical natural world. They explain why, what exactly makes an action right or wrong, and what exactly makes a person good or bad. So subjective relativism would be a theory. The theory says again, as long as you, the person, you decide, you feel like you approve that a particular action is right, it's right for you, even though other people may think this is wrong, may feel the action is wrong. But again, morality is not objective, it's not universal, it's not transcultural, it's a matter of opinions and feelings. And we say the problem with this is that morality is concerned with how we treat other people. If there was only one person in the world, just one person, this theory would make perfect sense because you cannot enter into any relationship with anybody else. You cannot hurt anybody else. But notice, as long as there's one person, even a newborn baby in front of you, there are constraints on your behavior, certain things you can no longer say, you can no longer do. Therefore, it's not enough to say morality is just something private, something personal. As long as I approve it, it is right for me. This would also mean everyone is morally infallible. This means everybody cannot make a moral mistake because, again, as long as you believe it, it is right for you. And this would also mean that you can't really have any genuine moral disagreement between people. Again, it's like saying I love blue and you telling me I don't love blue, but I just tell you that I love blue. You see, it's impossible to convince me that I do not love blue if I tell you that I love blue. So that's pretty much what we said last time. There's another theory that falls under relativism. This is the theory of cultural relativism. This theory says actions are right to the extent that they're proved, they're endorsed by a culture. Morality is not objective, universal, transcultural. The good is what your society approved of. The good is what your society approve of. For example, let's say you find yourself in a country, you're allowed to have four women, polygamy. In some societies, a man can marry four or five women. In American society, you're allowed to marry only one person. Marriage is between two people. So, according to cultural relativism, polygamy then is not something that is wrong. If in your country, in your culture, in your society, this is what they approve of, me living in American society, I can't even judge this as wrong. It is wrong for me, perhaps, but it's right for you. You see? In fact, if I were to tell you polygamy is wrong, then I'm guilty of ethnocentrism. I'm judging your culture from the perspective of my culture. You see? So if your society approves polygamy, let's say, or child marriage, or slavery, or honor killing, or genital mutilation, or let's say arranged marriage. In some societies, parents choose your husband, your wife for you. In American society, it's not like this. You meet somebody in high school, in church, library, or the club, the two of you fall in love, then you go to Vegas, you get married. Your parents may not even know. This is the way our society is built. So if somebody else comes from a different society in which their parents choose their partners, their wives, their husbands for them, then you see it is right for them. Of course, in our society in America, we don't do so. So again, same conclusion, it is right for them, but in American society, we would say it's wrong for us, which is okay because morality is not objective, it's not universal, it's not transcultural, it is the socially approved customs of your society. Okay? So therefore, again, I'm not allowed to judge a different society because if I judge them, I'm using the rules of my society. But you see, they have different rules, different customs, different traditions. Okay. Now, one problem with this, then, this would mean, okay, cultures are also morally infallible. If you find yourself alive, let's say during World War II in Nazi Germany, then other societies can't say Nazi Germany is wrong for killing Jewish people. If you find yourself alive in the 1920s, 30s, 40s in the United States when we had segregation, then somebody from South Africa, somebody from Nigeria can't judge American society because we had racism, well, have racism, we had segregation, because it is our laws, our rules, our customs. Nobody from a different society could come to America and say, well, you guys, you shouldn't have segregation. You see, if segregation is approved, it's legal, it's accepted by the people, well, that is good. But you see, how do the people know if something is wrong? Also, the problem is that this theory is difficult to explain how we make more progress. Because if you take social reformers, people like Dr. King, people like Malcolm X, people, let's say, wanted to end segregation, people were fighting for civil rights in the 1950s and 60s. And according to this theory, then they were wrong because they were going against what was accepted, what was legal at the time. Segregation was socially acceptable, it was legal. So therefore, you would say Dr. King was morally mistaken. Dr. King was confused because if the good is that which is accepted by society, then Dr. King was going against the good because he was fighting for reformation. So this would be one of the problems with this theory. Also, what if a society says, you know what, I think women are inferior to men. I think we shouldn't send women to school. Women are inferior to men, therefore we shouldn't send them to school. According to cultural relativism, you see, that's their country, their culture, their rules. There's nothing we can say about that. In fact, it is right for them. Then you see, then you could easily hide behind society. You could basically hurt people and hide behind certain rules, certain customs and tradition. Just, you know what? That's the way things are in my country. You see, it is accepted, it is agreed that women should not go to school. You see. Let's move on. Some theories fall under what's called consequentialism. Consequentialist theories, these theories claim what makes an action right or wrong has to do with its consequences, its results, its outcome. It's not what society says, it's not my feelings, it's not my intention, it's not emotion, it's not intuition, it's not the will of God, it's none of that. Just look at the results of what we do. The rightness or wrongness of an action depends solely only on the amount of good it produces in society. Roughly, there are three of them. There's one called utilitarianism, there's one called hedonism, and there's one called ethical egoism. So let's go over them one by one. Utilitarianism, again, these are examples of consequentialism. Sometimes people use utilitarianism and consequentialism to mean the same thing, but utilitarianism is an example of consequentialism. Um, you see this little trolley right here. Let's say you're in charge of it. Let's say it's moving on its own. You can't really stop it, but all you could do is to deviate the trajectory, and it can kill either one person, it can kill five people. You can't stop it, you can only change its direction. It's going to kill five people, it's going to kill one person. It's up to you. What should you do? Utilitarianism says the action that produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people, that is the good action. So in this example then, it's better to change the direction so it can kill only one person instead of five. It's a better result, it's a better consequence, it's a better outcome if only one person dies instead of five. See? So in everyday speech, we capture this when we say, I'm going to do something for the greater good. I can sacrifice one person or a few in order to benefit as many people possible. We capture this also in everyday speech when we say the ends justify the means. The end result, the outcome. Look at the result, not the means. So the most important thing is not the means. It's the achievement, is the outcome, is the consequence in the end. And Star Trek, I think they say the needs of the few, so the needs of the many outweigh or are more important than the needs of the few. Again, that's the same philosophy. So in this theory, it's not just your personal belief, your personal benefit you should take into consideration, but everyone else which will be affected by your action. You can ask yourself, if I do X instead of A, which action will benefit the greatest number of people? Which action will bring the greatest good to the greatest number of people? Again, let's use a different example. Um, let's say 50 people will die, but there's something if you do it, if you kill, say, one person, 49 will go on living. 50 people will die, but if you kill one, 49 will live. Only the one person who dies. So what should you do? You can ask yourself, what is the best result? One person dies or 50 people die? Then you see it's better than that the one person die, 49 people live. So the result, the consequences, the outcome is the most important thing. Of course, you can make it more complicated. If this man changed the direction of the trolley, what if this one person is his only child? You see, versus five strangers. So which action then will bring the greatest happiness? You see that? So if you go purely with numbers, one person die or five people die. Of course, it's better that one person die. But again, what if this one person is the only child of this man? You see? Now, if you ask utilitarianism, if you ask utilitarians, okay, what do you mean by good exactly? How do you define good? They define good in terms of pleasure. The good action is that which increases pleasure and decreases pain. You see, the good action is the action that increases pleasure and decreases pain. So because of that, sometimes utilitarianism is associated with hedonism. Hedonism is the belief that pleasure is the highest good. Good, pleasure, happiness, they mean the same thing. The good is not something different from pleasure. Happiness is not something different from pleasure. A pleasant life is a good life. A good life is a pleasant life. Again, pleasure is the greatest, is the highest good. Now, it's pretty obvious everyone loves pleasure, but we can also question whether or not pleasure and happiness are the same, because pleasure doesn't last. Eating ice cream is pleasurable, drinking some Hennessy is pleasurable, but happiness seems to be something that is deeper. Happiness lasts. Again, the pleasure you derive from eating ice cream probably lasts 5 minutes. But then how can we say pleasure and happiness are the same? Because happiness can't just last 5 minutes. Happiness has to, again, be more profound, deep seated, right? Also, you could question whether or not pleasure is always good, because we all know if you seek pleasure all the time, it will lead to pain. We all know some pleasures directly lead to pain. Drugs give pleasure, alcohol give pleasure, but if you're high, if you're drunk all the time, you see, you can't function. Also, sometimes we sacrifice pleasure for things that are not pleasurable. We sacrifice pleasure because there are things in life we consider to be more valuable, more important than pleasure. Then how can we say pleasure and good and happiness, they're the same? Parents sacrifice pleasure all the time for their children. Parents even die for their children. If you have a test, an exam, a job interview tomorrow morning, you're preparing for that. Your friends want to go out clubbing, drinking tonight, which would be fun. But you see, you may say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to postpone this instant gratification because there's something much more valuable. You see, to be fair, they distinguish, well, some of them distinguish between mental, intellectual pleasures and bodily pleasures. Jeremy Bentham, one of the person who championed this view, says happiness is pleasure, pleasure is happiness. They're the same. John Stuart Mill was a follower or disciple of Jeremy Bentham. He said, well, the pleasures of the mind, intellectual pleasures, the pleasures you derive from doing, let's say, science, poetry, music, architecture, math, these pleasures are qualitatively superior to sexual pleasures, like food. So these pleasures are superior to sensual or bodily pleasures, food, drink, sex, and so forth. That is, if you were to compare the quality of the pleasure given by intellectual, mental activities to bodily pleasures, food, drink, one of them is higher. He thought we have to ask this question to somebody who've experienced both of them. If all you know, let's say, is drinking, is eating, is sex, and sex, you're the wrong person to ask. But if you experience both of them, then again, you will see some subtle differences between them. So John Stuart Mill actually emphasizes more the joy of the pleasures of the mind. And frankly, for some philosophers, when they say pleasure is the highest good, they don't mean, eating a large pizza or chicken wings or drinking beers or martini by the beach. They mean calmness, calmness. They mean joy. They mean tranquility of the mind. They mean you're getting rid of fear of diseases, fear of death, and so forth. Of course, there are some of them who also emphasize bodily pleasures. So hedonism also is a form of consequentialism because the good action is the action whose consequences increases pleasure. Okay. The other theory that falls under consequentialism, actually, before I get to that, one problem with utilitarianism is that the theory, since the theory emphasizes only consequences, let's say you kill one person and save five. Say you kill one person and save 49. Of course, you're gonna feel guilty. You'll grieve. Your character is gonna change because now you kill one person. If you ever kill somebody, it's gonna change you. But the theory says, well, don't focus on the fact that you kill one person. Focus on the fact that you save 49. In other words, the consequence on your personal integrity is not the most important. The larger consequences is that, oh, you see, you save 49. Also, the innocence of the person may not matter. See, as long as there's a greater good you're promoting, right? So these are some of the objections, criticism that people have against utilitarianism. Ethical egoism is also a consequentialist view. This theory defines the good in terms of self-interest. The good is that which furthers, is that which advances my own best interest. Your interest can be success, it could be pleasure, it could be happiness, it could be fame, it could be music, it could be poetry, it could be money, it could be power. Whatever your self-interests are, the good is that which promotes, advances your self-interest. Sorry. This theory says one person who championed this view is Ayn Rand. This doesn't mean You cannot help people. You can cooperate with them. You could even help them. But you're doing it ultimately for yourself. Let's say I did a favor to you. You needed a ride to go somewhere. I took you there. This theory says I shouldn't help you just because, oh, I'm a good guy, I'm compassionate. I help you, I did a favor to you because in the future I'm going to need you. You will remember that I helped you in the past. Therefore, when I need you, then you're going to repay me the favor. Then you see, even though I'm helping you, I'm thinking of myself. We capture this theory in everyday speech when we say, scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. When we say, what's in it for me? You see that? What's in it for me? So I don't want to, I don't want to just do it and help you out of kindness of the heart. What is it I'm going to gain? What's in it for me? Again, scratch my back, I scratch your back. And when famously said, I don't exist for you, I exist for myself. Again, I can work with you, I can cooperate with you, but I'm doing it for myself. I'm not your servant. I don't exist to serve you. I don't exist to serve society. She said somewhere else, don't help anyone unless you can gain something of equal value in return. Don't help anyone unless you can gain something of equal value in return. In other words, you should always be expecting to gain something back. You should not just put the needs of other people before your needs. You shouldn't just help them out of the kindness of your heart. What's in it? What's in it for you? Now, there's some truth in this theory. First, your self-interest, you are the only one who can pursue them. Nobody else can pursue your dreams, your ambitions, your goals, your aspirations. You're the only one who can pursue them. Nobody else. So this part is true. But the theory goes a bit further. In fact, somewhere else she said, compassion is a vice. Compassion is a sin because when you're driven by compassion, you end up giving people things that they don't deserve, they don't earn. She said, do not give anything to anyone unless they earn it, unless they deserve it. Likewise, don't expect society to give you anything unless you earn it, unless you expect it. Okay. Notice she also said again, don't help anyone unless you can gain something of equal value in return. Okay, let's say you're passing outside, you see a homeless man asking for money, you give the homeless man $10. If you give the homeless man $10, okay, what do you want from him? Are you expecting something in return, something of equal value in return from the homeless man? No. What if you're walking outside, you see some hungry children, and you say, children, I'm an ethical egoist. I believe the good is my rational self-interest. I'll plenty of food and water. I could give you something. I could give you some food. But what's in it for me? How will I gain? How will I benefit by helping you? You see that? So there are some limitations to this theory. I think, well, it's actually a very important theory because capitalism, our economic system, is sort of based on the pursuit of self-interest. When you open a business for the, well, because you want to make money. You see why in our society there are people with so much money they don't know what to do with it. There are people, even though they work two jobs, they barely have any money because capitalism really is the pursuit of rational self interest. So again, this theory doesn't say you can't help people. You can help people. You could do things for people, but always ask yourself, what's in it for me? How can I gain? How can I benefit? Again, scratch my back, I scratch your back. Ethical egoism is based on psychological egoism, which is the claim that by nature, by nature, everything human beings do, we do them for the sake of self-interest. The natural motive for all actions is self-interest. So what's the difference? Ethical egoism says pursue your self-interest. That's what you should do every single day. If everybody does that, everyone does that, the world would be a happier place. Everybody would be way happier. Everybody would be more successful. Don't worry about other people unless you're cooperating with them because there's something you want to gain. So pursue your self-interest. You are required. You have to. You should. Psychological egoism says, well, you don't even need to tell me to pursue my self-interest because by nature, I'm already doing that. Every day, that's what I do. I pursue my self-interest. This would mean altruism is impossible. Altruism is self-sacrificial behavior, putting the needs of other people before your needs. So ethical egoism would say is all behavior is driven by a sense of self-interest, selfishness. Whether it's compassion, it's love, it's friendship, it's sensitivity, everything we do underneath, behind it, is the pursuit of self-interest. You always want to gain something no matter what you do. If you find a wallet outside with money, nobody saw you, you could keep the money, but you return the money, you still gain something. You gain peace, you gain self-satisfaction, you don't feel guilty. Maybe you thought God was watching you, God will bless you. If you see a child drowning in a swimming pool, you don't know the child, you don't even know how to swim, you jump and save the child, you still gain something. At the end of the day, it creates helper's high. It makes you feel happy. You gain something by helping this complete stranger. Compassion is not always a noble thing. You could give money because you want people to vote for you. I could give money to charities because when I do my taxes, I make the money back. You see, love is selfish. Romantic love is selfish. Parental love is selfish. So anything you can think of, this theory is going to say it is selfish. So the problem with psychological egoism, though, since he's telling us how people do in fact behave, so it's a scientific claim. It's telling us people behave selfishly all the time. All scientific theories have to be falsifiable. That is, you have to be able to imagine a counter example, something that could make it false. But this theory doesn't allow for any exception, none. Even if you kill yourself, it's selfish. No matter what you do, it's selfish, selfish, selfish. You go to the homeless shelter and help people, it's selfish. No matter what you do, it doesn't allow for any exception. Now, the problem with ethical egoism, since it defines the good in terms of rational self-interest, it seems that not everything that benefits you is a good thing. What if cheating benefits you? Would you say cheating is good? It also seems that certain virtues like honesty, fidelity, loyalty, they're good in themselves. What if honesty does not benefit you? Does this mean loyalty is not good? Obviously not. Also, notice it seems that it would lead to conflict. Imagine if everybody in the world tried their best to be selfish. Imagine a world in which there's no compassion, because we believe compassion is a vice. Because if I have compassion, I may end up helping you even though you don't deserve it. Imagine a world with, again, complete selfishness, rational self-interest, no compassion. You see? This is cold, this is dark. But again, this is a powerful theory because capitalism, our economic system, is largely based on the pursuit of rational self-interest. Okay, so these are the three theories that fall under consequentialism, ethical egoism, hedonism, and utilitarianism. Okay, so again, what they have in common is that they emphasize consequences of what we do. Deontological theories, or call them non-consequentialists, they don't focus on consequences. They focus on either the action itself or the intent of the person performing the action. Actions are judged on the basis of what they are. or the intention of, sorry, the person performing the action. The word deontology means duty. A duty is an obligation. An obligation is an action that must be carried out regardless of the consequences. For example, if you become a soldier, they send you to Afghanistan, it is your duty to go. It doesn't matter if you believe we're there for the wrong reasons, you have to go. If you're a soldier, they send you on a mission to drop a bomb somewhere to kill one person. The one person will die, but also five innocent people will die. It is your duty to do that. If you borrow money from the bank, it is your obligation to pay the money back. If you're if you have children, it is your obligation, your duty to care for your children. So the ontology was championed by a German philosopher called Immanuel Kant. According to this view, actions have more value if they are done with a good will. A good will. A good will is the will to do your duty for your duty's sake. A good will is the will, the intent, the inside, the internal motivation to perform your duty. You see, so the consequences don't matter. It is your duty. You do your duty out of respect for your duty. You do it, you do it. So duty then is the foundation, is the basis of morality. Not consequences, not pleasure, not selfishness, not what society says, not self-interest, not personal feelings and opinions. Was it your duty? Now the question is, how do I know what my duty is? What is my duty? He calls it the categorical imperative. A duty is a self-given, you give it to yourself, rational, universal moral principle that we follow out of sense of duty. It's a rule that is rational, universal, that is for everybody, but you're the one who create the rule, and you follow the rule out of a sense of duty. In other words, the test to see if an action can be your duty or not is whether or not you can universalize it. In plain English, what if everyone else in the exact same circumstances did that? What if everybody else in the exact same circumstances did exactly the same thing? In other words, let's say I give you an exam next week and you're thinking of cheating in the exam. Then ask yourself, since I'm thinking, well, since I want to cheat, could I require, could there be a rule, rational universal rule, that says whenever you want to pass philosophy, you have to teach? Can cheating become a duty? You see, obviously not. Let's say you're doing your taxes and you're thinking, well, maybe I should cheat in order to make some more money. People do cheat in life, yes. But can it be your duty, your obligation? Obviously not. You see that? Let's say you need money. You come to me and say, well, Professor, I need to borrow some money because I have an emergency. And you promise you're going to pay me the money. You're going to repay me. But except you know you'll never pay me back. You promise you'll pay me back, but you know you're lying. So the question is, should people make false promises? Can people have an obligation, a duty to lie, to make false promises? Again, the answer is no. People do lie, but it cannot be your obligation to lie. Why? Because you cannot universalize it. You see, there cannot be a rule that is rational, that is universal for everyone, that requires people to lie. Again, since you're thinking of lying, ask yourself, could I require everybody else in the exact same circumstances to lie? Since the answer is no, you see, therefore it cannot be your duty to lie. Now let's take a different example. Let's say you see a woman driving in the streets Then she has a flat tire. You're passing by, you see a woman struggling to change a tire. Ask yourself, can there be a rule, a principle, rational, universal, that says whenever you see a woman struggling to change a tire, help her? Notice this sounds okay. There could be a rule that says whenever you see a woman changing a flat tire, be kind and help her. But there cannot be a rule that says you ought to lie. Because of this theory is absolutist. It's an example of absolutism. Since there cannot be a rule that says you ought to lie, this means you have a duty to tell the truth all the time. You should never lie at all, regardless of context, situations, consequences, circumstances. You should not lie. Let's say you find yourself alive during World War II. You're hiding some Jewish family in your basement. The Nazis are looking for them. You hear somebody knocking on your door, the Nazis. They ask you, are you hiding any Jewish person? Are you hiding any Jewish person? You know, if you tell the truth, they're going to find them, shoot them on the spot, kill them right away. Or you could lie, you could just say no. What should you do? If you focus on consequences, on utilitarianism, utilitarianism would say, well, lie. Because if you lie, you're going to save the lives. You're not obligated to tell the truth to some madman. Lie. But the ontology would say, well, you have a duty to tell the truth. No exception. It's not just in good times or in bad times, you also have to tell the truth. So therefore, you should tell the Nazis, yes, I'm hiding some Jewish families in my basement. So if they find them and kill them, it's not your responsibility. It's them. They did it, not you. Your only obligation, duty, was to tell the truth. And you tell the truth in good times and hard times. You see, so you perform your duty for your duty's sake, not for the consequences. Okay. So this theory, some complain and say that's a bit cold. It's a bit vague. It's duty. Sometimes you may not even be able to tell what the duty is. Let's say, for example, some societies they have honor killing. Like if a child brings shame or disgrace on the name of a family, like your father has the right to kill you, could you make honor killing into a rule? It's just not clear because some people will say yes and some people will say no. Another theory that falls under non-consequentialist is divine command theory. This theory, we sort of mentioned it in chapter 2. It says pretty much right actions are those that are willed by God. The good is what God commands. It is what God wills, is what God says. God is the creator of morality. The same way there are laws of science, laws of nature, physics, biology, chemistry. God also gave us moral rules. God made the rule. The same way children, your parents give you rules. Likewise, God gave us rules. Remember when we were children, there was a time probably your parents asked you to do something that seems questionable, and you say, Mom, why? And your parents just say, because I said so. Because I said so. They didn't feel the need to explain themselves any further. Just trust me, I said so. In the Bible, the story that captures this is the story of Abraham and Isaac. One day God spoke to him and God told him, take your son, Isaac, the one you love. I'm going to show you a mountain. Go to that mountain and sacrifice Isaac for me, to me, in my honor. God gave Abraham Isaac, the promised child. After that, God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. This was a tough choice, tough test. Abraham one morning took the child and some servants. On his way to the mountain, Isaac says, Dad, I see you're going to have a sacrifice, man. Who are you going to kill? And Abraham says, child, God shall provide. God shall provide. So this is why Abraham is called the father of faith, le père de la foi, the father of faith. He trusted God even though he doesn't understand. He doesn't know if God will interfere and stop him. Maybe God will let him kill Isaac or give him, or bring Isaac back from the dead. Maybe God will give him another child. He doesn't know. He just trusts God completely. You see, so the same way children trust their parents, even though you don't quite understand what mom and dad are up to. So Abraham trusted God just like that. And then when he got to the mountain, maybe his hands are shaking, his knees are trembling, maybe tears are flowing from his eyes. He pulled the dagger to kill the child. The angel shows up and say, Abraham, stop, stop. I now know you truly believe in God. And God provided an animal, and Abraham sacrificed the animal, not Isaac. Now, the story raises a bunch of questions. Let's say the angel was late, caught in traffic, and Abraham had already killed the child. According to divine commentary, well, he was doing the will of God. So if he had already killed the child, this would have been an act of worship, an act of submitting his will to the will of God. Of course, me, if I see somebody killing his child, for me, I'm like, this guy is crazy. That's murder. I didn't hear God told him to do so. But in the context in this story, Abraham submitted completely to God. Abraham himself didn't know he could do it. So God had to bring the faith out of himself. You see. So we are called to trust God the same way Abraham trusted God. So literally the good is what God says. Now, some problems with this theory is that first, this can be abused. If somebody tells you God told them something, how do you know this is true? If somebody tells you God spoke to them, can you call God to verify it? In 2011, there was a case, right? 2001, there was a case of a woman called Andrea Yates. She drowned 5 children in a bathtub because she said God told her to kill the children in order to save them from the devil. To be fair, she was suffering from postpartum depression. She was taking some pills too. So maybe she wasn't completely there. She was a bit crazy, mental. But she claimed God spoke to her and told her, well, kill your children to save them from the devil. The difference, though, is that in the story of Abraham, at the last minute, God interfered and prevented it. In her case, God did not interfere. So I'm saying people can abuse this. You could use God to justify anything, really. But that's the problem because if God is good and just and loving and perfect, and you meet somebody telling you God told me to kill people, okay, how do you make these two work together? Why would a loving God, just righteous, good, perfect God telling you to kill children? It doesn't make sense. One reason people believe in this as well is that uh, somebody says if God doesn't exist, everything is permissible. That is, there's no really right or wrong. God is the foundation. So if God exists, in this life, we never fully become perfect, morally perfect. We never reach that level. If God doesn't exist, when we die, that's it. The good people, the bad people, they have the same destination, the grave. Adolf Hitler, Stalin, criminals, rapists, gangsters, terrorists, Jesus, Mother Teresa, Dr. King, all of them have the same destination. So this means when they die, their morality, their virtues end with them. But if God exists, of course, the journey goes on after we die. So this is pretty much motivation for people to just be morally perfect, to try and just keep trying to improve oneself. One problem with this, well, one objection is what's called the Euthyphro problem, Euthyphro's dilemma. Are actions wise because God commends them? Does God commend them because they are right? Is something right because God says so? Or does God say so because it's right? Divine Commentary says the first one, an action is right because God commends it. So it's not the action itself, it's the commending it. It's the will of God. You see? The will of God is what makes something right or wrong. It's not the it's not the act itself. It's whether or not it was commended will or not by God. So the will of God is primary. You see? So the reason why adultery is wrong is not because of the sexual act itself. It's because God says it is wrong. See? So that's what the first question is. The second question says, does God commend it because it's right? This would mean then, this means that something is wrong first. That's why God says, don't do it. So if you have to go with the first one, an action is right because God commends it. This means as long as God commends anything, it is right. God says adultery is wrong, therefore adultery is wrong. If God were to say, well, every first Friday of the night, so every first Friday of the month, it's okay to commit adultery, then it would be okay. Because it's not the action itself, it's what God says. Number two would say, well, the reason why lying is wrong, or rape is wrong, or murder is wrong, well, they're just wrong in themselves. They were wrong before God says they're wrong. See that? This should mean then God can't make something that is wrong right. If something is wrong, God can't make it right. If something is right, God can't make it wrong. So when God says, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder, he couldn't have said differently because those things are wrong in themselves. So this would mean that either morality is arbitrary, God could just change the rules at any time because God is God, or morality exists separately from God. So the way believers solve this dilemma is by saying, well, of course God wouldn't say thou shalt rape and murder and plunder and ravage and kill, because those things go against the nature of God. The commandments of God, they're based on the holy, perfect nature of God. Therefore, God will never say lie and kill and murder and plunder and no, because what God wills, what God says, what God commands is a reflection of the holy character of God. Okay? But again, notice in the story, Abraham is willing to do his duty. Abraham goes beyond ethics, beyond morality. Because if you see his action just based on ethics and morality, Abraham is a murderer. In the modern world, Abraham would have been sent to prison for premeditated death. You see, but in this story, he transcends, he postpones ethics. He goes beyond ethics because he has this higher calling. He trusted God completely. You see, so again, it's not the consequences here. It's whether or not it was commended, it was willed by God. Okay. One more theory. Virtue ethics. Virtue ethics says, well, the first question is not what does God says, what does society says, what does society says, what do you feel, what does your intuition says, your emotions, is it to myself, is it in myself? Interest is, I mean, the first question you should ask is what kind of person you want to be in life. What kind of person you want to be. What would a virtuous person do? So virtue ethics focuses on character. Character. Virtue ethics says the things we do, we don't do them just because of the circumstances or society or cultural pressure. Our action reflect the kind of people that we are. Let's say the class is meeting face to face. Again, you are the last person in the class, and then you find a wallet in the class full of money. What exactly that will dictate, what will determine whether or not we take the money? According to virtue ethics, is not emotion, intuition, society, the will of God, or duty, or consequences. What will determine whether or not we take the money is your character, the kind of person that you are. You see? So that's what you should work on. So your character is not something you do. Is you see, we capture this view. Sometimes we say there are certain things I don't do. It's not me. This doesn't reflect me. I'm not this type of person. I'm not this type of girl or a man. There are certain things. I just don't do certain things. So when we use this language, we're referring to virtue ethics. So character is an ingrained disposition. It's not something that happened once. It becomes a habit because you do it again and again and again. So what we all need to focus on develop is our character, the kinds of person, the kind of people that we are. Aristotle was one person, the one person who championed this view. He said the highest goal of humanity is eudaimonia, or happiness, or good flourishing. Pretty much he thought that you couldn't be a happy person if you're not a virtuous person. You see, the good life, the happy life, is the virtuous life. He distinguished intellectual virtues from moral virtues. Intellectual virtues are virtues, things you could learn from books, critical thinking skills, logic, rationality, scientific facts. Moral virtues are virtues you learn in life, you develop them in life. Courage. You can't become brave by reading a book. You have to face danger. Benevolence, honesty, loyalty, generosity. So you can only develop those virtues in the schools of life. So, how do you become a virtuous person? He said you become a virtuous person by habituation, habit. Virtues are like skills. If you want to become a great dancer, what do? You dance, you dance, you dance, you dance, you dance all the time. If you want to become a great basketball player, you play, you play, you play, you practice, you practice, you practice. If you want to become a great piano player, you play the piano again and again. You do it so much until it becomes ingrained in you. You see, ingrained. Until it becomes second nature. Until it becomes natural. You see? You see, some people dance so well. You see, they dance effortlessly because they're so good at dancing. They're not forcing it. So he thought virtues all like this. If the same way, if you want to develop compassion, courage, benevolence, honesty, generosity, you have to engage in those behaviors all the time, constantly, every day, whenever possible. So you develop them, and you until they become again ingrained in you, until they become second nature, until you have a natural inclination, propensity, a natural disposition to do those things. You see, until you do them effortlessly. So when you find a wallet with the money, it's not your wallet, it's not your money, then you won't even think about taking the money. Effortlessly, like the great dancer, you're just going to return the wallet because virtue becomes ingrained, ingrained, ingrained in you. He thought the moral virtues, they occupy what he calls a golden mean. A golden mean is a balance between two behavioral extreme, two vices. Courage is a virtue. Cowardice, notice, means not enough courage. Foolishness or recklessness means too much courage. So the middle position is between two vices. Cowardice is a vice. Recklessness, foolishness, that's a vice. The middle position, the mean, that's what a virtue is. In other words, nothing too much. Showing off, that's not a good thing. Sh- Too, if you're too cheap, that's not a good thing. Moderation between the two. He thought again, moral virtues stand between two extremes, two vices. So the wise man, you see, is a moderate man. So you stand between the two vices. Lastly, for this lecture, feminist ethics. Feminism does not mean you don't have to respect your husband, your partner, because you work, you make money. Feminism used to mean equal rights. That is, men and women, they're equal under the law. That is, all the rights men have, women have them. So legally, but also morally, or in the eyes of God, if you will, men and women, they're both, sorry, we all equal. There was a time there were a lot of barriers and a lot of women, or things women couldn't do. Women couldn't vote until 1920 in America. Women couldn't go to school unless you're part of the aristocracy. There were plenty of barriers that prevented women from doing certain things. Men were more free to do certain things. So feminism was an attempt to basically level the playing fields, to give women rights, to give them opportunities, to remove the barriers against them. In other words, being a woman doesn't have to count against you. If you fail in life, it shouldn't be because you are a woman. You could fail because of lack of discipline, because of lack of opportunities, because of something else. But we cannot say, well, because you're a woman, therefore you're gonna fail. So again, feminism was an attempt to just get rid of all those barriers. In America, feminism has been successful. Again, women, all the rights men have, women have them. And feminism is linked to sometime ethics of care. Notice most of the theories that we just discussed, they're about rules and rules and rules and principles. Emotion, intuition, feelings, what culture says, what society says, what the will of God says, what duty says, consequences, self-interest. Notice they don't emphasize care. They don't emphasize compassion, faithfulness, kindness, love, sympathy. They're more about rules and rules and rules and rules and rules and moral principles. A newborn baby doesn't need logic, critical thinking skills. A newborn baby needs nurturing, love. If somebody is sick, what they need is sympathy, what they need is care. Our grandparents, eventually our parents get old, they can't do a lot. What they need is not again legal, it's not legalistic reasoning, it's not rules and principles, but they just need somebody to care for them. So we reach, so there are various stages in life. What we need is not logic, is not philosophizing, is not logical thinking. What we need sometimes is just someone to show those virtues: compassion, kindness, love, sympathy. In other words, just basic caring for somebody else. Okay, so ethics of care is linked to feminism. And the last part was is existentialism. I think on Thursday should I'm not going to discuss this because this lecture is already 1 hour long. But on Wednesday, should you have any question about existentialism, feel free to ask in class on Thursday. All right, I'll see you guys on Thursday. Bye.